Hi everyone. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the nation's favourite flower, which is the bluebell. Now, our three counties have got lots of beautiful bluebell woods in them, many of which are looked after by the Wildlife Trust, like this one, which is right on my doorstep, which I'm very lucky to have. But actually the UK as a whole is home to about half of the world's bluebells, so they're really important for this species of plant. However, as well as being absolutely beautiful and really iconic, there's a far more to the bluebell than actually meets the eye at first. It's got lots of really interesting adaptations, and hopefully I'll be able to share some of that with you today. So the first thing we're going to talk about is, why are bluebells blue? Now the reason for that is because their main pollinator is the bee, and bees see really strongly in blue and yellow, so they can't see red very well, but they're really attracted to blue and yellow. So one of the reasons that bluebells are blue is to try and attract their main pollinator, which is the bee. However, that's not very easy to actually achieve, because blue pigments are almost impossible to find in nature. So most flowers that are blue are actually using pigments called anthocyanins, which give that sort of very deep red colour to a lot of our autumn leaves, and they're manipulating them using like pH and different chemicals in the cells to try and produce a blue colour. So they go to quite a lot of effort to try and produce this colour, and it's all for the benefit of bees. Another thing that they do to try and attract bees is produce this beautiful scent, and if you're standing in a wood full of bluebells, you really do sort of get that really delicate scent coming through. The reason for that is that bees are quite good at seeing close up, sort of 5 to 10 centimetres, but their distance vision is pretty terrible, so they really rely on scent to find the flowers that they need for their nectar. So that's a bit about why bluebells are blue. So the next thing that's really interesting about bluebells is the way that they grow. So most plants, they use energy from the sun to convert carbon dioxide and water into glucose, or sugar. And this is great, except that when it gets really cold, like in the winter, this process doesn't work very well, which is why a lot of plants become dormant in the winter, and they kind of go to sleep and then they carry on photosynthesizing the next spring. However, in bluebells, they actually don't use glucose, they use fructans, which is a different type of sugar, and this allows them to carry on photosynthesizing when the temperatures are much colder. So there are several ways that this is a really useful adaptation. So first of all, it means that they can carry on growing in the winter. So actually, rather than germinating due to warm weather like most seeds, bluebell seeds actually germinate in the autumn when the temperature gets a bit colder. So they start that germination process in the autumn, and they start to grow sort of during the colder weather of the winter, so that next spring they're ready to sort of burst out and create that carpet that we know and love. So another thing that fructans allows them to do is it allows them to grow much faster, because most plants grow by duplicating their cells, so that's how they sort of extend their leaves. But fructans allows bluebells to stretch their cells as well as divide them, and this means they can grow much more quickly. There's a downside to this, however, and that it means their leaves are quite fragile. So when they first come up, if you've ever seen a bluebell when it's sort of first emerging, the leaves are quite sort of upright, but the longer they get and the more the bluebell grows, they become a little bit floppy, and that's because of this stretching process. It doesn't have that structural integrity. It also means they're not very resilient to being trampled, so if a leaf is damaged, it can't carry on photosynthesizing, which is why it's really important that you don't trample bluebells if you're out in a bluebell wood. Make sure you stick to the paths. Okay, so that's a little bit about fructans. Another thing that makes them really interesting in terms of how they grow is that they have contractile roots. So this means when they send down their roots, the seed or the bulb, they can actually contract them and draw the seed or the bulb further down into the soil. So bluebell bulbs are found quite deep into the soil, and this is really useful for them because it means they're protected from harsh temperatures and perhaps from animals that might like to eat them. So they're very deep in the soil because they've got these contractile roots that pull them down. So the next thing we want to discuss is why bluebells are often found, or actually are an indicator for ancient woodland. So many people know that if you've got bluebells, it means that your woodland has been there for a very long time. But actually it's not necessarily woodland that bluebells need to grow, it's the soil that's not been disturbed for a very long time. The reason for that is that bluebells rely on a fungi, a mycorrhizae, to take up phosphate from the soil. So phosphate is really important for all plants to grow, but the deeper down in the soil you go, the less of it there is. And we've just talked about how bluebells' roots are really deep and their bulbs are really deep, which means there's not a lot of phosphate down there, and they're not very good at taking it up on their own. So what they do is they rely on this fungi, which forms a network of filaments all through the soil, all in the woodland. It connects all the bulbs and the plants together. And this fungi is really good at taking up phosphate. And what it does is it forms a symbiosis. So it's like a trading partnership with the bulbs and the bluebells. So it connects to the roots, and in exchange for some of those sugars that we talked about, those fructans, it gives the bluebell phosphate. So this means that the bluebells can't really survive without this fungi, and this fungi really needs to be undisturbed in the soil for a long time, which is why bluebells are mainly found in ancient places. Another reason that you often find carpets of bluebells in ancient woodland is that they take a long time to grow. So bluebells are very slow growing. It takes about 5 years from a seed to a flowering bulb. And actually most bluebells sort of grow by and spread by dividing those bulbs, and that obviously takes a very long time. And any seeds that do germinate tend to germinate right next to the parent plant. So in order to create a carpet like the one behind me, it takes a very long time. So that's why we tend to find carpets of bluebells in ancient woodland. Okay, so the final thing that I want to talk about is how bluebells are really competitive in the woodland. So we talked about them being able to germinate in the autumn, and this gives them a head start in the spring when they can start growing. Another thing that they do is that phosphate that they're able to take up using the fungi, they can actually store that in their bulbs, which stops other plants from taking it up, which is a bit selfish for the bluebell, but it means they've got a greater chance of surviving. Something else that they do is when they create this carpet, they're blocking out a lot of the light, so smaller plants underneath can't grow. And also, when they do come up early in the spring, their shoots are like little tiny spears, which means they can pierce through the leaf litter that might be on the woodland floor, so that they can start growing and form this carpet that you can see. So that's a few really interesting facts about bluebells. So next time you're able to visit a bluebell wood, even if it's not this year, you can have a think about all those wonderful adaptations that lead to the wonderful carpets that we see in woods like this. And what I'm going to do as well, I'm going to post a couple of minutes of video just of this beautiful woodland, so that you can enjoy it even if you're not able to visit a bluebell wood this year. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon. Okay, bye.